Apparently there's going to be another beheading of an American. This time it was a British person last week, but a reporter on Friday. We're taping this on Wednesday right now. And an interesting poll came out that said nearly 2 out of 3 Americans back airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. Now, 65% of Americans back U.S. airstrikes. That seems like an incredibly high number to me. A little more than a third say they're opposed to sending ground troops. 53% say they think there's a high risk of a terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Despite the concern, only a third are closely following news of U.S. airstrikes. This is perfect storm for a disaster. Now, as I've said since we started this thing, Congress has not voted to authorize this war. John Boehner, Mr. Bravery, keeps saying, well, Obama should call us back in so we can vote on it. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have to get authorization from the president to do his job. So it's Congress's fault. It's also Obama's fault because he's just going ahead and doing strikes without getting authorization. And yes, everyone can argue about the legal loopholes that they all jump through to make this happen. But I wanted to make this about the American people because 2 out of 3 people are happy bombing these guys. That seems incredibly high to me, considering we didn't really have a debate about it. When last year, when Assad used chemical weapons, there was a debate for a couple weeks about what we should do, should Obama get authorization, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're bombing the guys that are fighting Assad, and we're not even having a debate about it. So what's going on? I
think it's somewhat understandable to, if maybe you're not completely fluent on the subject, to want to fight fire with fire, crazy with crazy. But there are well, you know, it's not under debate right now, but if we were to do this without that, I think there's a lot of long-term ramifications that we're not considering, and you know, a further escalation of violence, more years with military occupation, and I don't think we're ready to do that yet.
Yeah. All right. So I know you're a constitutionalist, John. So something like that. You know about the government. How about that? That sounded good, right? Yeah. You know a little. So what do you think about just the congressional part of it? Because I keep talking about it. Literally nobody's talking about it. Yeah. It is not discussed in the news. We went to war with a new country. Yeah. Yes, we're not fighting the regime in Syria, the guy that we were going to fight a year ago, who John Kerry compared to Hitler. Now we're literally bombing the people he's fighting. But what about that? Just the congressional part first.
I mean, if you look back historically, the way that we go to war has never really followed with what I assume the founders thought we would. I mean, we tried to get the War Powers Act in place to try to rein in the power of the president to unilaterally send us into some military conflict. That was weak on day 1, and it's only weaker in year 40 after it was passed. So I'm not super surprised by that, especially when, if they were to have the debate in the House and in the Senate, I think that they would support it. I think that
I do too, which is even more odd that Obama's
surprising that he didn't. Yeah, that is correct. But I think one of the reasons that he feels he can get away with not even having that debate, a debate that he would almost certainly win, but maybe he's worried that if they had it, some strings would be attached that he doesn't want. It's a lot safer to go it alone. There's 2 principal reasons I think it's been so easy to get the American people to back this. One, that it's airstrikes and it's not a full-on war with boots on the ground. I think that coming out of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, airstrikes seem like, oh, that's nothing. We can do that. We do that all the time, right? Aren't we airstriking so many places? Right. And then even more importantly, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was pitched to the American people as, this is not a war against Islam, this is a war against these regimes. Now it seems pretty clear that we're fighting at least some form of Islam. Yeah. There's a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment among the American people.
Obama says they're not Islamic and they're not a state.
He says that, yes, that's true. But you go on Fox News and you look at you look at what ISIS is pointing out, and it seems like that's what we're fighting against. And so I think for the American people who don't understand and probably at the very least distrust Muslims and Islam, I think it's easy to get them to want to constrain that power in some way.
Right. How much of this do you think has to do with just the general state of our minds when it comes to war? We're still in Afghanistan. Do you know why we went there in the first place? Fight them over there to fight us here?
It was a long time.
Yeah, nobody knows why we're there. It's the longest war in American history. We just signed some pact that means we're going to be there till at least 2024, and mark my words, we will be there long after that. So is part of this just that war means nothing to us anymore? Sort of John's point of the airstrikes. It's like, well, airstrikes isn't war. Even though I'm pretty sure if someone was airstriking us, we'd call that war, wouldn't we?
Well, we say airstrike and we say drone attack, but we don't really think about what that means a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, well, we talked about the beheading, and there's something about the human brain that they look at a beheading, and it seems so very different than a bomb that kills 10 people. Whether it's a bomb that we drop from a drone, or if it's ISIS blowing up a village, like we care more about the single hostage who's beheaded than the thousands of people that have already been killed by ISIS in more traditional violence.
Yeah. So where do you guys stand with the beheading things? Because we've talked about it here. We've shown some of the videos. Twitter's now not letting you post the beheading videos themselves, but there's plenty of beheading stuff out there on YouTube. Do you think it's just feeding the propaganda? Because I'm sort of two minds on this. Partly, I think you have to show it and talk about it because it's happening. So not talking about it doesn't help. And on the other hand, there is the propaganda version where if we keep talking about it, you just gin up, especially the uneducated people who just see it and then immediately want to attack. Where do you fall on how much we should talk about and show the visuals of actually what they're doing?
Well, it is a disgusting and horrible act to watch someone literally lose their head, but we have to consider how many other people are being killed horribly and unjustifiably as well. It's not to excuse that, and it's not to let that go. We should mention it at least.
Yeah.
But
we have a weird thing about how you
have to think about
died.
it in context.
Right. So
and it's horrible. This huge picture.
It's horrible. I think we all agree on that for sure. But we have this weird thing on how people die that sometimes it's not okay. So Assad killed around 100,000 Syrians with conventional weapons. Everyone seemed okay with it. Then the gas thing, I think it was about 200 people. Everyone went crazy. We ended up not doing anything, or I guess maybe we took the chemical weapons.
Most of them.
Kind of. Now we're upset about beheading again. So it's weird to me that we pick and choose. Well, I guess it does have to do with the visuals, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're delivering basically a media package for people to put on. I think early on it was important for us to show them both because it was new at that point, and also we wanted people to understand the severity of the threat that we were facing. But now I feel like, one, usually on the Young Turks, if the family says that they want or don't want it to be shown, that's usually what we go by. We don't want to offend the families who've already been through so much. But perhaps more importantly now, I feel like ISIS wants us to show them, and so I'm inclined not to. And I feel like if they were to put one out and no one was to spread it on Twitter or on cable news, would they be less likely to make another one? I think they'd be somewhat less likely, and so I'm inclined to not show them from now on.
But they still might be doing the beheadings,
they might still be doing
just not showing them. Final thought on this: why don't other countries do more? Which I think I've said in every ISIS video that we've done. Like, everyone hates America for jumping in and trying to fix things, and we always make it worse and all that. But it seems to me like right now, ISIS is on the Syrian border. They're about to take this town. I'm sorry, ISIS is on the Turkish border, and they're about to take. Yeah, they're in Syria. Yeah. Why don't Turkey's got a pretty big army. I mean, all these countries there, they have armies. Why is it that we have to lead everybody all the time when it's in their backyards, not in our backyards?
I would say that it's a burden that we willingly took on ourselves after World War II and have continued to take on ourselves in every possible opportunity. I think that, first of all, Turkey is going to get involved. If they take this town on the Turkish side of the border with Syria, they're going to have to respond. ISIS is in an interesting position right now, both that they can strike inside of Turkey potentially very soon, and also that they're right on the borders of Baghdad. We've sort of come to grips with the current territory that they hold in Iraq and in Syria. If they take either of those two particular towns, or city in the case of Baghdad, I think that then you might see an international ramping up. And also, by the way, it is the United States that's leading the charge, but we do have France and Australia, which are contributing to the airstrikes. We have some Arab allies, including the UAE, that are flying missions against ISIS. So it is almost all us, but it's not just us.
Yeah, but we know that it's like 90% us.
Yeah.
It's something that just seems odd. Yeah, France and Australia, we're all kind of doing it, but all the guys in their own backyards who have weapons, who we give weapons to, much like the UAE, like we give these guys weapons and then they still ask us to help. I don't know, it is extremely complex.